You sign a lease for your first apartment. College just starts and is going well. You're working your ass off as a waitress to make ends meet. You just ended a relationship going nowhere and started a new one you're very excited about. After leaving a friend's house one night, nobody sees or hears from you again. There seems to be no clear answer. Until, that is, 5 years pass and a local attorney offers up his client who has been under suspicion since day one. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. "20-year-old Megan McDonald lives in Wallkill, grew up there. And by most accounts, from the time they were kids, Megan and her sister Karen felt a bit safer than your average kid, being that Megan's dad was an NYPD detective with an untarnished reputation and respect of all his colleagues and superiors. And yet, sadly, in 2002, the age of just 47, Dennis McDonald had a massive heart attack and died, leaving their mother, Elizabeth, to raise the girls and 2 half-brothers. Megan is proud of her NYPD detective father, who not only helped out on September 11th, but also played a significant role during the 1993 World Trade Center bombing investigation. Wallkill, New York is one of those towns in the southern part of the state you kind of just drive by on Interstate 84 without thinking as you head from northern New England south, either into Manhattan or New Jersey. With 30,000 residents, Wallkill could be considered a small suburb of New York City, seeing that over 10 to 12 million people are squeezed into Manhattan and its surrounding boroughs. Megan truly embodies that quintessential American girl next door. Big blue eyes, dirty blonde, almost red hair, and one of the most magnetic smiles you'll ever come across. Anywhere she goes, Megan brings a positive, feel-good energy. Just a joy to be around, anyone who knows her would say. It's 18 months after one of the worst terrorist attacks on American soil, September 11th. On March 13th, 2003, the tone and feel of life in and around New York City is still tenuous, with a walking on eggshells feel to life in general. The closer you are to New York City, the more you feel it. I can recall from my own experience living in nearby Connecticut and traveling into the city often back then, and actually being at the World Trade Center towers on September 10th for work, that with the right gust of wind on a hot day, you could still smell the remnants of that horrible, horrible day. It is a smell anyone at the time can tell you they will never forget. On March 13th, Megan is inside the Galleria Mall in Wallkill. She's at the American Cafe, finishing up an early shift. It's 3 p.m. when she clocks out and heads to the parking lot. She is slated to be back at work the next day at noon. On her way home, Megan drives south to a bank in Middletown, New York, the largest city in Orange County. By 7 p.m. that night, Megan is back in Wallkill, driving through the Greenway Terrace neighborhood where she grew up. She runs into 2 old friends and stops. "Come on in," they tell her. "We're having a party." No doubt there will be many people Megan knows inside. And nostalgia is a powerful pull. I think anyone will agree with me on that. Driving through the neighborhood where you grew up brings it all back, flooding those memories, good or bad, back into us with that raw emotion. Megan doesn't get out of her vehicle. She appears a bit uncomfortable and anxious, as if there is someone at the party she doesn't want to see. "I'm meeting friends in Middletown tonight," she says. "I can't stay." Megan then drives back to Middletown to spend the night with friends there. They hang out and they watch the television favorite, Friends. It's clear she leaves around midnight, telling everyone, "I have to work the day shift tomorrow and need to get some sleep." She doesn't mention stopping anywhere on her way home or plans to meet anyone. They say their goodbyes and Megan drives away on her way back home to Wallkill. Megan lives on Karen Drive in a small apartment she just recently moved into weeks ago. Once again, being close to Greenway Terrace, the neighborhoods being about 15 minutes away from each other, Megan stops by that party for a second time. But she still doesn't go inside. She is there specifically to meet someone. 15 minutes later, close to 12:30, she drives down Cindy Lane nearby and out of that neighborhood. Soon, she is pulling into the Kensington Manor apartment complex not far away. There's a woman inside her apartment at the same time, and she looks out her window when she hears what is a loud stereo system playing. Music thumping loud enough for the woman to be alerted to the vehicle. Megan is driving a Mercury Sable, and she does not have one of those stereo systems with the bass boost and a speaker the size of a large cooler. The woman is looking out at Freezer Road in front of her as she hears the music. She gets a good look at not only that Mercury Sable Megan is driving, but in back of Megan's Sable is a dark-colored vehicle, a Honda hatchback. The car with the music rattling the glass, sounding muffled and bassy. The car appears to be following Megan. The woman is taken aback by the loud music at such a late hour, but the cars drive by and the music softens, so she lets it go. 2 minutes later, here come both vehicles once again, the music getting louder, passing by in the opposite direction. What is Megan doing meeting someone at this apartment complex and then driving away with that person following her minutes later? The woman writes it off as kids being kids. She shakes her head, goes to bed. The next morning, a resident at Kensington Manor is out and about early, walking. The resident sees a vehicle parked strangely in back of the complex, which abuts a wooded area. It is Megan's Mercury Sable. Nobody is inside the car, and Megan is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, on the other end of town, later into the day, March 14th, 2003, friends and family members of Megan's are calling her on what is one of the earliest versions of a cell phone. But nobody can get hold of Megan. It's now past her shift at the restaurant, and she never showed up for work. Megan is not at home, and none of her friends have seen her since the previous night. Everyone is now growing increasingly concerned as each hour passes, and Megan appears to have vanished. At this time, her car has not yet been reported as being found in back of that apartment complex, so family and friends, even police, hope she just decided to take off somewhere without telling anyone. I want you to think about the intensity and dread within these moments for friends and family. I don't want to just gloss over how harrowing and emotional and terrifying these crucial moments within the cases I cover are for loved ones. A young woman living alone is missing. It's almost impossible for the mind not to go where you don't want it to. The thoughts running through you become so intense at times, the anxiety so physically demanding, you feel as though your heart will literally explode from the pressure. You are frantic. You feel helpless. You don't know what to do with yourself. Police, of course, can help, but in your mind, they move at a snail's pace. You want answers, and you want them now. Just over 4 miles directly west of Kensington Manor, where Megan's car will ultimately be found, a boy and his uncle are out on the land the uncle owns off Bowser Road. They are walking down a country dirt road path. It's been a rough winter, with lower than normal temperatures and lots of snow, and some of that snowpack is still hanging around. It is now March 15th, near 1 p.m., as the two walk and take in the country air and nature. Coming upon the type of scene these two are about to, I hear this from witnesses all the time, is a very surreal experience. When you first see something unnatural, it almost feels as if you've stepped into an alternate reality because your brain is entirely unprepared to register such an image. Your mind has never considered such a sight, which makes you entirely unprepared. Many people have reported to me that a scene such as the one this boy and his uncle are about to discover is so beyond scope, so outside the norm, your first reaction is to think it is fake, that someone has played a trick on you. As they walk along what is a dirt path, there in front of them is a woman's body lying on the ground. And what is clear, from just a cursory glance, is that this woman has been beaten to death with what appears to be a hammer. Of course, they turn and run back to their house and phone police immediately. Let's take a break. Come back, and I'll get into how this case unravels over the course of the past 20-plus years with a break in the investigation and update in the case just recently this year. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling, and I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow the show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol in my name, M. William Phelps. Based on the law enforcement climate we are now in, I want to say up front here, before we get back into the narrative, I have dealt with the New York State Police Major Crimes Division in Middletown, New York on numerous occasions while writing several books focused on that area of the state. Those titles include Deadly Secrets, Every Move You Make, and Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I have the utmost respect for this division. They are thorough and invested deeply in victims' advocacy and speaking up for murder victims. As many of you know from listening to me over the years, I wouldn't say this about any police division. Megan's car is found 2 days after her body is discovered on that footpath in Wallkill. It is towed to State Police Headquarters in Middletown. Forensics get to work immediately and begin to comb through the vehicle centimeter by centimeter. When they conclude their assessment of what transpired inside Megan's car, they are certain that a vicious assault took place inside the car, and Megan's killer used repeated blows to her head with a handheld weapon to murder her. Anything from a pipe to a hammer, which indicates, investigators know, someone Megan knew and trusted enough to allow into her car at some point. Remember, there's now a report of a Honda hatchback following her, but there is no indication that hatchback was stalking her or that Megan did not know she was being followed. To the contrary, it appears as though they were following each other, heading somewhere together in separate vehicles. There is even now a report that Megan stopped her vehicle and a young man parked his vehicle, the hatchback, and was seen hopping into Megan's car at some point. Let's back up a moment. Megan had been dating a dude named Ed Holly. After Megan's dad, Dennis McDonald, died the previous year of that heart attack, Megan was given his benefit, and so she had been receiving $1,250 a month. She'd lent Ed Holly some money to buy a car not long after she started receiving those benefits. But Ed had not paid Megan back. In fact, according to a state police charging document, Ed had refused to pay her back. This led to tension and ultimately Megan breaking up with Ed not long before her murder. The person at that party going on Megan didn't want to see on that night before she went missing? Ed Holly. The other role Ed Holly played was Megan's source of marijuana. When they were together, that same New York State Police document claims they smoked weed every day, and Ed was her source for getting it. Megan's sister Karen told NBC News that she and Megan were always together and they were inseparable as kids. And the one trait that stands out regarding who Megan was is her compassion. Karen said you could feel her warmth, her friendliness, and the love she had in her heart. It poured out of her. So this tells investigators that Megan would never provoke Ed Holly and even get into any sort of back and forth with him. She'd just as well forget about him, which could be where this relationship, from his point of view, went south. Megan had just signed that lease for her first apartment during the first week of March. She was also going to nearby SUNY Orange Community College, but didn't yet know what she wanted to study. Now, let's get back to that party in Wallkill Megan stopped by a second time after leaving her friend's apartment. Megan never went into the house when she returned. Two of her friends tell police that she pulled up and they had a short conversation with her outside. Megan told them she was there to meet someone, which was when they then watched Megan pull down Cindy Lane and drive away, presumably heading off to meet that person. Megan had also recently started dating somebody new, and she was excited about how things were going. Yet, she was still in touch with Ed Holly because, number one, he owed her money, and number two, he was her weed supplier. So the theory becomes, had she gone back to the party to meet Ed Holly and buy some weed? Was he paying off his debt to her in weed? Investigators believe from the outset that this is a textbook case of intimate partner violence. Overkill is there in every aspect of the crime scene. Rage is obvious all over the place in this crime. With these types of murders, investigators tend to focus on what is called a narcissistic injury. This means that the victim, in some way perceived by the killer, injures his ego, his entire self-worth, his internal vision of himself, which then flips a switch in him and he turns to rage in order to tamp that feeling down and deal with it. He responds with violence instead of walking away. It can happen in an instant. Karen later verifies this by telling NBC that Megan was no wallflower, not someone who kept her opinions to herself. She told you how it was, in a gentle way. She wasn't mean. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. And Megan, by the way, was all of 100 pounds, just over 5 feet tall, very petite. New York State Police investigators begin interviewing what will amount to over 100 people. Local police, county police, and even the FBI get involved. A lot of what they find keeps coming back to the ex-boyfriend, Ed Holly. There's some indication from witnesses that Holly was extremely jealous of Megan's new boyfriend, and the idea that Megan had cut him loose tipped him over the edge. Those certainly are motives for this type of personal, intimate murder. But is there any evidence against Ed Holly? That's the question. How do you prove this type of case? Forensics, thus far, have not given them anything to really go on in the form of DNA or fingerprints. It's almost a given that Ed Holly's DNA and fingerprints would be inside Megan's vehicle. They had been dating. That would be argued and torn apart in court easily by a good defense attorney. There needs to be more, like a murder weapon and DNA on that weapon, or a witness. Regarding the latter, police begin to think about a second suspect, or rather, someone else who could have been involved with Ed Holly, if Holly is their guy. It seems like if Holly did this, he had to have help in some way after the fact. Still, the case begins to collect frost. Not for law enforcement failing to keep the fire burning on the investigation, but more so because leads go nowhere and people stop talking. This happens in cases. We don't hear about this part of an investigation much because it's not as dramatic as police hunting a killer getting closer and closer. But many murder investigations, in fact, almost half in this country, go cold and remain unsolved. In 2008, there seems to be a break. A former assistant district attorney, David Hoovler, now running a private practice as a defense attorney, contacts the prosecutor handling Megan's case. Quote, "I represent someone involved in the murder of Megan McDonald and wish to negotiate a plea deal." End quote. What he says to the DA's office. Here you have a cold case being handed to investigators with a phone call. That kind of shit happens. Not often, but it does. Over the course of several weeks, Hoovler speaks with prosecutors and claims that his client is willing to admit to his role in the murder, but only if a plea is involved. In good standing with evidence, Hoovler tells them that his client says a ball-peen hammer was used to kill Megan, and he can lead them to it. As that is going on, remember that witness from the apartment building talking about loud music and two vehicles, one of which being Megan's Mercury? Well, in interviewing her again, she is certain that the other vehicle, the one playing the loud music, belongs to a guy who lives close by and drives a purple Honda hatchback. His name? Ed Holly. Let's take our final break and come back. There are still several twists and turns in this one coming. David Hoovler is a tall, balding, middle-aged man with gray hair and a gray and black goatee. The dealings he had with the prosecution didn't much go anywhere, but Hoovler comes out and names his client as Andre Thurston, not Ed Holly. Police refer to Thurston as suspect number 2. They're with Holly when they claim Holly allegedly bludgeoned Megan to death. In March 2010, Thurston dies of a drug overdose, which takes him completely out of the picture. Your smoking gun witness now gone. In a flash. Hoovler, however, perhaps shows his true colors when he then runs for district attorney in the same jurisdiction that would cover prosecuting Megan's killer. Let's get that straight. Hoovler, the guy who brought this evidence forth of that ball-peen hammer, he now runs for district attorney in the same jurisdiction that is going to prosecute Megan's killer. And you know what? He wins. This is important because Hoovler then goes on to win 2 more times, taking us up until 2022. Why is it important that he wins again and again and had at one time injected himself into a very high-profile murder case? I think I'll let you decide after hearing what happens next. Police come out and say Hoovler actually alerted Ed Holly that he was a major suspect in Megan's murder. Hoovler then attends a vigil with Megan's family in 2022, introducing Karen, Megan's sister, to the crowd. At this time, Ed Holly is actually in prison serving time for a drug-related conviction. It's no surprise that Ed Holly is a suspect. But what Hoovler is alleged to have told Holly is that the New York State Police will continue to investigate him, which they claim hurt their case. Also, that Hoovler had undermined their case against Holly and that Hoovler has refused, for whatever reason, as the DA now, to bring Holly into a grand jury and indict him. These are huge accusations with big implications. What they are saying is that Hoovler is protecting Ed Holly for some reason. I think the bigger question is, if it's true Hoovler was speaking to Holly, why is a DA speaking to a suspect in a murder case to begin with? It's questionable and sketchy and in poor taste and just adds so much pressure to the New York State Police's investigation. There's obviously conflict of interest, potential witness intimidation, along with a host of other legal issues that will absolutely come up during a trial if Holly is ever charged and brought in front of a jury and judge. And here's the bottom line with what Hoovler had called into the prosecutor's office back in 2008. He gave details about the murder which had never been made public. One of the reasons that deal for his client then fell apart was that Hoovler asked for probation or a 3 to 9 year sentence for his client. On the 20th anniversary of Megan's murder, several law enforcement organizations get together and fund a $20,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. A billboard is put up. It's clear that the state police are not giving up and have been working aggressively on this case for 20 years now. Then a special prosecutor is set to take the case to a grand jury, which is convened and ready to charge Ed Holly. So now we have a special prosecutor brought in, Hoovler out. That's the way it should work. On April 20th, 2023, New York State Police arrest Holly, now a 42-year-old man, for second-degree murder in connection with Megan's homicide. 7 days later, Holly is released from custody after Orange County District Attorney David Hoovler comes out and says protocol wasn't filed in the investigation. He then states that his office will make Megan's investigation its number one priority, and the special prosecutor will oversee it all. But he is essentially pulling this case back. He is essentially protecting Ed Holly. Again, for whatever reason, nobody knows. I want to point out that Ed Holly denies any involvement in Megan's homicide, saying publicly, "I'm definitely not guilty." I don't know that he needed definitely, but nonetheless, he is definitely not guilty. On January 29, 2024, Holly is finally indicted for second-degree murder in Megan's death. Karen and Megan's mother, Elizabeth, files formal disciplinary complaints against David Hoovler, 4 attorneys in his office, and former DA Frank Phelps. In these complaints, what they basically claim is David Hoovler worked behind the scenes to muck up the entire investigation. State police investigators involved in the case throughout the years come forth and basically say the same thing. One investigator gives the USA Today a dump of documents outlining how this all went down. Talk about a cluster F of a case, all of which could have been avoided. And how in the hell does a DA who once brought forward information about a murder and represented a client in private practice he claimed committed the murder now argue in front of a jury and judge the guilt of another man? How would that look? I don't think that can happen. It doesn't even make any logical sense to me. I'll say there needs to be an internal investigation here by the feds. Whatever the hell is going on with this guy, Hoovler, needs to be unearthed. Ed Holly's trial for Megan's murder set for September 2024. He is free on bond. And Megan's family, 20 years later, they still have not gotten justice. I want to thank all of you for continuing to tune in to CTL in big numbers. I am humbled by this and honored. My aim is to begin doing Crossing the Line special limited series, with the first one coming out later this fall, while continuing the weekly show. I'll be making a formal announcement very soon about the subject, and I'm sure many of you won't be disappointed. School starts soon. Watch out for kids and buses while driving. I have to remind myself of that, maybe more than anyone else. Remember, I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts, and log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. Everyone, please, be safe, be aware. Sources for today's episode: New York State Police reveal new lead in 2003 murder by Veronica Fulton. March 13th, 2022, NBCnews.com. JusticeForMegan.com timeline. Charging documents. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC. Written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.